Let's take a look at this piece of walnut that a lot of people probably wouldn't look at. We've got a pith right here and another little small stem here. As you can see, it was set out for a while, so it's kind of rotted and drying out here on the edges. But there's still a lot of good wood. That's just the sapwood. So we're going to turn in and we're going to get a platter or a little bowl out of what's left here of this. We got a little bit of a check going here of the bark. But let's see what happens. Get it set up in the lathe. We get it down to where it looks centered. That don't look too bad there. Our gap here is about the same all the way around. So we'll crank the tailstock in. And like that, we'll get our tool rest brought around to the side. Make sure everything clears. Get our face shield on and get ready to go here. We're going to use a 3/8 inch bowl gouge. And we'll just start in here, and as you can see, it's chipping and flaking off pretty easily. Because that's just that rough bark, rotted bark and stuff that we're going after right now. We'll try to get in here. As we can see, some of this bark is starting to come off, and we're getting down to some solid wood right here and here. But we'll keep going. We'll get the rest of it down. Reposition our tool rest a little bit closer. Start making our pin in here that we're going to turn from. And you can see we're getting down to some solid wood now. We can increase the speed a little bit. Then we can take and get that plant leg grounded out. And now let's stop and take a look and see where we're at. Okay, we're down here. We've got some good wood here. A little bit of sapwood left there. And some rotted stuff right here. So we'll need to take our form down a little bit deeper here. Let's reposition the tool rest. Get back down here to the good wood. And that turns a little big, so about that size. And we'll take a look again. I think now we're still not quite all good wood. The rest of the way around we are, so we need to take a little bit more. Let's kind of cuff that up and we'll put a lip on this little plate. And sometimes it's easier to come in from this direction. So there we've got a lip for our bowl. And come right around. Take the rest off of there. Get this corner cleaned up nice. Then we can go in with our parting tool. And we can refine that shoulder a little bit better. Get us our tenon put on there. And then we'll cut this off. We'll get rid of all that old wood. Now I like to go into where I've got it down close, and then we can slow our lathe speed down a little bit in case it jumps out on us. And I've still got about 3/4. I'll take this down to about 1/4 of an inch, 1/2 inch. Okay, now we can pull that out of the lathe, and then normally I can just put my parting tool in here and pop that off. And so now we've got our tenon, and we're down to pretty decent wood. Well, we've got some checks in there. There's one of our knot holes. Maybe we should clean that up a little bit more. So we'll just bring him back in and lock him in again. Well, let's see, it looks like I'm off on this side only. There we go. Okay, let's bring our speed back up. And now we'll straighten him up again. We'll clean up that tenon a little bit. And we'll come down here and get a nice final cut. We'll come in from the edge. We'll come out here and do the outside edge. And let's take a look at what we've got. Now we've still got these checks in here. Our knot here blew out, so we're kind of messed up there, so we may need to take that rim down. And we've got some stress checks in here around this pith. I think these will fill in with some epoxy. We'll kind of straighten this out a little bit more. I think we'll take this outer rim down until we get rid of this knot. And let's see what we did there. We've still got a little bit of it up there, just on half of it, so we could go that thick. Let's do just a little bit more. And then let's cut this in a little bit deeper here to give us more of a rim. And now let's see what we have. Now we're down pretty straight. We've still got this knot and this check, but let's fill those with epoxy. Okay, I've got my 2 parts of epoxy here. We'll mix them up a little bit. And for my putty knives, I just use the metal banding that you'll find on home improvement stores for the piles of lumber and stuff. If you ask them, they'll give you all of it you want for free. Cut them off with 10 snips, and when they get too well used up, you just cut off another piece. So we've got those pretty well filled with epoxy now. Let's take a look around the rest of it. I don't see any other bad spots anywhere. So our epoxy there. There's some little bit of almost dried out pithy stuff there we'll cover up. So let's let that dry now. We're pretty well dry now, so let's go ahead and turn off the epoxy. Then we're going to use the bowl gouge. We're just going to take a fine cut. We're just trying to get that epoxy off and not take a whole lot more. And a lot of times instead of a bowl gouge, I'll go to a scraper. I'll show you that here in a minute. But once we get that turned off, now those cracks are all filled in. I guess I forgot the one out here. But sometimes a scraper, I just use a square scraper and come right around, and I can really smooth it out, get right up into the corner there. I can come on this side and start right in at the corner and come out. And that'll leave me a little bit better surface. Okay, so now we're ready to take it off of the tailstock here and turn it around and put it in the chuck. We'll get rid of the spur drive. And we'll chuck it up. And we'll use the same 3/8 bowl gouge. We'll get our tool rest around here and get it lined up. And I normally like to start out here and kind of get the edge, the lip refined. We'll take a look and see how I did on that. That looks pretty good all the way around. Now we can start hollowing out the center. Start out with the bowl gouge in here. And we'll just make some little cuts. Each one getting a little bit progressively bigger. Now, once we get down to this area, there's many different ways to tell where we're at on this project. I kind of watch the inside and the outside and try to guess where I'm at. I can come around on this side with my gauge and loosen it up and tighten it, and so this distance right here is going to be the thickness of the bottom of my bowl, and I can use this on the inside to see how deep I'm cutting. So again, we'll take a little bit more out. Smooth that out there in the bottom. Get my light moved down a little bit so I can see. And a lot of times, instead of using the bowl gouge, I like going to the scraper for doing the bottom of these bowls. Just a round nose scraper. And then I can just come right out on them like that. If I tilt the scraper up and then bring it down, I can pretty well start that center. Check our depth again. And we're almost touching, so we got just a little bit farther to go. Now I'll stop and take a feel on our thickness. Feels like I'm a little bit thick right in here yet. Pretty well out. Check my depth. I'm at the depth pretty darn close to what I want. So I just need to take a little bit right out of here. About like that. Check it again. That feels pretty good. That's about the bowl I wanted. And as you can see, we still have this pith in here. We've got some beautiful grain colors. So let's start out and do a little bit of sanding. We'll clean up the lathe a little bit there. Get the tool rest moved down out of the way. We'll start out with some 120. Give it a light sanding to get rid of the really rough spots. And once we see that we're smooth in here and don't see any lines per se, about there, then we'll go to some 150. Get it all sanded off there. And these sand, depends on how smooth you turn as to how much sanding you've got to do. Then we'll go up to some 180. Get it on the back, underneath. And last off, we'll finish off with some 220. Little blast with there, dust off of it. And we'll start out with our cloth. And now here's where these colors will really start to pop. We'll use a little bit of deft and come in here and put some finish on this. And I like wiping it on and getting it around just a little bit at a time like this. I've tried doing it with the lathe spinning, and I just haven't had as much luck at getting a nice smooth finish on it. We'll get the edge here. Kind of wipe this down, make sure I've got everything out. Then we'll start on the back side and get it all cleaned up, or finished up, I guess we say. And once I'm happy with the finish I've got on, that I've got all the areas covered, I'll kind of wipe it to make sure I don't leave any drips, runs, whatever we want to call it. And we'll call that the first coat of finish done. Now we'll let that dry for a while. Alright, now that we've let it dry, I take and slow the lathe down a little bit and then use some 600 grit sandpaper and kind of just take off the high spots, smooth it out a little bit, and now we're ready to turn it around and start on the other side. So we'll take it out of the chuck and we use a foam pad, put in there, bring our tool rest down, bring our tailstock down, and I just use the foam pad right against the face of the chuck, come in and center up where we were before. I use the dimple and stuff on the bottom of the bowl to center it. And from there I bring my tool rest up, and I just use a 1/4 inch detail gouge and come in and start cutting away the cannon. Just a little bit of an angle on that detail gouge and back drag it. Get rid of the biggest tear of the cannon that way. And as I get in here, I try to go down to where I look like I have some left. And then I can come out here and start in and shape the bottom. Come back in and put a recess in the bottom so that it just sits on that outer ring. And then as I get in, I can get down and taper this down. I usually just keep going down kind of until it breaks sometimes. Sometimes I go ahead and stop. But that pretty well finishes off the bottom. And then if you want to put a little bit of detail in it, I just use a small skew and go in and put in a couple lines. I'll take a piece of sandpaper and go ahead and hold that on there and clean it up a little bit. And from there, we can take it off of the lathe, take the tailstock down, and this will usually just pop right off. Sometimes I go ahead and use a little carving tool to take this off and straighten it up. And then other times, let's move around, and other times I just take a sanding pad on a drill and move it up that way. Either way works. We'll get our finish back out. A little dab of finish on the rag, and we can finish off that bottom with some. And from that, we have the completed bowl. And as you can see, we ended up with some beautiful looking grain in that bowl, and nice looking grain on the outside. But that's what we turned from that rotten looking piece of walnut.